Welcome to Liz Collin Reports. On the podcast, a Minnesota state senator attempts to keep drag queens away from kids in a bill introduced at the Capitol. Senator Eric Lucero, a Republican who represents East Central Minnesota. Thanks so much for joining me to talk more about this.
Well, thank you for the opportunity to join you. It is definitely an important topic, as many of the things are happening down at the Capitol this session.
And I say that it's kind of difficult for me to wrap my head around that we even have to have this conversation. Hard to believe this day and age, but explain what you're hoping to accomplish with Senate Bill 933.
Well, and you're spot on. It truly is a sad testimony to where we've come, where we've degenerated, in my opinion, as a society to the present state. So as we look back the last number of years, we've seen an incremental approach by radical progressives to go after our children, targeting their minds and introducing them to topics that are not appropriate. And as we've seen recently now, whether it be in public libraries or other venues, children are being exposed to the performances of drag queens. And what my bill seeks to do is to classify these performances as adult entertainment.
You posted what I would call a disturbing video to go along with this push for the bill and getting parents to sign a petition in support. But it shows parents cheering their kids on, giving drag queens money. We've done plenty of stories on this kind of thing here at Alpha News, too. But there really is no restrictions on this kind of thing in Minnesota, correct?
Well, and, one wouldn't think that would have to restrict this type of content from being exposed to children. But, yeah, that's just another testimony to where we've degenerated in our society. So, yes, it's been a long-standing practice in Minnesota statute to prohibit adult entertainment and sexual performances from being in certain locations in certain cities, and certainly protecting our children from being exposed to such inappropriate content that this hasn't been part of the classification. But yes, we've gotten to a point now where absolutely that's what we need to do, is to classify these sexualized grooming performances as adult entertainment. Again, not to just protect the safety of our children physically, but to protect their minds, because that's what these performances are doing, is they're targeting the minds of our children, desensitizing them, and making it so that our children are more receptive to this, again, unhealthy sexual behavior.
You've been petitioning parents on this, and we'll go ahead and provide that link in this story as well. What's the reaction been? Is it something they even know is happening? You also have this push, I think, by the mainstream media to sort of normalize all of this, and a lot of people just don't even believe that that this is happening in the world around them, and also a media that kind of cheers this thing on as well.
Well, exactly. We've seen also another advent of the modern day of corporate legacy media either flat out ignoring these types of damaging content, or giving only a positive spin to such very detrimental type of behavior. And so, yes, it's been up to myself and other legislators to try to do an end run around these gatekeepers that are not properly reporting, and get the awareness out to parents across the state as to what is happening. And that's what I and others are doing, is trying to get the awareness, and then being able to collaborate with these groups of parents that want to protect their children, so that when there's activity at the Capitol, they can come down, be it testify for or against legislation, to be able to rally, as recently happened on other related topics that are just as shocking, that parents were made aware because of alternative media to be able to come down to the Capitol and make their voice heard.
And you probably are referring to this trans refuge bill that we see pass in the early morning hours on Friday. And this is something that 69% of Minnesotans polled by the Center of the American Experiment did not support, these child sex surgeries, and in many ways, trouncing on parental rights. It really has just been a head scratcher, it seems, all session with so many of these issues.
And it truly is, if you look at where the priorities are of these radical progressive Democrats, so much of their legislation seems to be sexually oriented. Senate File 1, House File 1 having to do with abortion and making reproductive health care a fundamental right, independent of age. And so you've got children that are now, per state law, by radical progressive Democrats, able to make changes to their body that are not reversible, and do so without parental consent or even knowledge. Then with this most recent bill that you just referenced, where parents did come down and try to make a trans refuge, because the radical progressives are so out of the mainstream. And again, I've spoken with others. This is not just bad policy. This is even beyond evil. This is truly a satanic agenda that is positioning Minnesota to not cooperate with law enforcement or other legal efforts where there are states that do want to protect children and do want to make sure that this type of content is not accessible to children. That Minnesota, again, you can bring your child here, you could potentially kidnap children, bring them to Minnesota, and then they will be able to access this type of care. And I wouldn't even call it care. It's mutilation in many cases. And this is not somewhere we should be. This is truly downright satanic where these radical progressives are positioning Minnesota.
Turning your attention to the budget now, the Democrats have decided to spend the nearly $18 billion surplus after all. Shocking, right? But your reaction to that move, and I know you wanted to also mention, these new state employees, new state agencies, now to look forward to, Senator.
Well, what is a surplus? A surplus is an unexpected abundance of money above and beyond what they had expected or originally projected to be collected. And this surplus is exceeding $18 billion. So that $18 billion is over collection from hardworking taxpayers. Then, instead of rightfully giving back that money to whom it was over collected, radical progressives believe that they can spend other people's money better than they can spend themselves. And so they've made the decision to spend $17.9 billion of that budget. What are they going to spend it on? Well, they're going to create new agencies, and they're going to expand existing agencies to the tune of 2,300 new state employees. These are state agencies that are already bloated, that are already inefficient, and they want to just simply double down and make it even worse, growing government on the backs of over-collected money from taxpayers, when taxpayers themselves are struggling just to get by in their day-to-day lives due to inflation, increased taxes, and the other types of expenses that are in their lives. This is just downright sickening what the radical progressives are doing with this surplus.
And how worried are you that this is it for many businesses, especially small business owners in Minnesota, that they're just going to move, call it quits, go to South Dakota, go to Wisconsin? Well,
last December, we've had mainstream media report that for the second year in a row, Minnesota's population has stagnated. People are already recognizing this is a very hostile place to live, work, or visit. And so people are leaving. And the same is also true of businesses. I receive communications. I've spoken to other colleague legislators in both the House and the Senate who receive similar communications, not just from people that are leaving, but business owners. Business owners understand that there are more friendly places that they can relocate their businesses. And as expensive as that may be, it's actually cheaper for many of these businesses to close their doors in Minnesota, relocate to another state, and take their high-paying, good jobs with them, which again is going to be very critical as a negative impact on Minnesota's future economic viability.
We also had this fight over lunch money play out in St. Paul that we know in the end the DFL passed as well. You voted against that $200 million a year plan in the Senate, but four of your Republican colleagues voted in favor of it. Talk about why this was something you didn't support from the beginning.
Well, that surplus we just referenced, a significant chunk of that 18 billion plus surplus is one-time money from the federal government due to COVID relief related funds. And so creating brand new programs that are going to be persistent into the future using one-time money is not a good formula. And so what's going to happen in the future is either there's going to be a deficit and the program is going to have to be eliminated, or taxes are going to be increased. That's where I think the Democrats are trying to move us. They want to, in a time of surplus, they can't demand tax increases. So they're purposely trying to position the state to future deficits so they can call for tax increases on the backs of hardworking Minnesotans. But this program then is seeking to provide free breakfast and lunch to all children across the state, regardless of income. And that is just something that we don't need in Minnesota, especially when portions of that money are one time from the surplus. And so we do not need to socialize school lunches or school food. There are programs out there. If there are children and parents that truly are having a hardship and their children don't have enough food, we already have enough existing programs to make sure that those children are indeed do have food. But to provide food for everybody, including children that don't need it, again, is just creeping socialism, and it's, again, not going to work for the future of Minnesota's economic viability.
I'm curious to your reaction about a recent Star Tribune headline featuring a story about you. They say that you're giving the DFL majority a headache this session. I'm wondering, congratulations, first of all, on doing your job, but I guess you kind of had to laugh when you saw that headline.
Well, the reality is the Minnesota Senate is 34 Democrats to 33 Republicans. That means 49% of Minnesota did not vote for the Democrat majority in the Senate. And so myself, Senator Gruenhagen, Senator Drazkowski, and other Republicans are simply fighting for the values, fighting for the voices of that 49% that did not support the Democrat majority in the Senate. And so what I call standing up for the Constitution, standing up for the truth, advancing parental authority and family values, Democrats call a headache. The Star Tribune and other mainstream media calls a headache. That's the laughable part. All we're simply trying to do is fight for the rights of smaller government and constitutional principles. If that's a headache to the Democrats, well, then they need to realign their priorities to get in line with the great founding principles of this country and state.
On that note, Senator, this session we know has been moving at a breakneck speed with all that's gone on. You've been around for a while in the House, first of all, and that was in 2014, so about 9 years now at the Capitol. Just compare, what you've seen in sessions past to what is playing out this session.
Yeah, I've had the privilege of serving in the legislature for 9 years, as you just mentioned, and in that time, I've been in both the majority and the minority. And this is something that I've not seen before. It's this majority, this extreme radical progressives are moving legislation so fast for really one primary reason. And that is they're relying on the corporate legacy media to not report what's happening so they can advance this and get this extreme legislation signed into law before Minnesotans, hardworking people across the state are aware, and then it'll be too late. And then doing it as early as possible so that before the next election comes, people will have forgotten. So it's either people aren't aware of the agenda, they're moving so fast, or it's moving so early in the session that people will have forgotten.
As we close here, I wanted to spend a bit talking about education, something I know you're passionate about, but private schools across the state are booming, and you've pull no punches on this. You're very active on Twitter pointing this out and Facebook as well, but we have dismal test scores in public school. Where Minnesota really used to lead the way. What fixes this mess we seem to be in now in this state?
Well, here's the solution. We need to empower parents to be the decision makers for their children's education. Now, that can go by any number of names. I don't care what you want to call it. It could be tuition tax credits. It could be vouchers. It could be however it's called. But one of the silver linings of the COVID era has been parents were able to look over the shoulders of their children and view firsthand the curriculum and content that their children are being exposed to. And many parents became very upset because it is not the quality, it is not the type of content and curriculum that's going to allow our children to excel either academically or into adulthood. Now, when we compare Minnesota to other states, we are falling behind. When you compare Minnesota to other countries, Whereas other countries and other states are focused on reading, writing, and arithmetic, we've got the most powerful and influential union in the state, Education Minnesota, that comes to the Senate Education Finance Committee, of which I'm a member, and they are promoting divisive content focused on extreme topics, CRT, and gender confusion. It is not going to be helpful. It is not going to allow our children to excel and compete with children in other states or other parts of the world in this global competitive workforce. And that's the devastating thing. By the time that people actually are able to be aware of this, it might be too late for the children. That's why I'm among others that are really pushing to empower parents to make the best decisions. And that is the reason why homeschooling and private schools are flourishing in Minnesota, because people are realizing government schools are not delivering what needs to happen for their children.
Well, Minnesota State Senator Eric Lucero, we're very appreciative of your time. We know it's a busy time to connect at the Capitol. So thank you so much for being my guest today.
Well, I appreciate it. Always a pleasure to join you as we continue fighting for the truth and the future of our great state.
Thank you, sir. And that'll do it for this episode of Liz Collin Reports. We will see you next time.